Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour for June 5th. I'm coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And there are, fortunately and unfortunately, many developments in Canadian foreign policy this week, and so I think I'll get right to it and maybe have a decent amount of time for some back and forth. Unfortunately, last week we were cut off, and I know some people wanted to continue with some of that discussion, so there should be some time for that today. Al Jazeera earlier today reported on an agreement for elections in Libya. So 12 years after the Canada-led NATO bombing campaign, we might have some form of legislative and presidential elections to unite the country, which is a good development. But it's always important to remember what has happened 12 years later. Earlier in the week, the Nicolas Maduro, Venezuelan president, was in Brazil for a big summit, Latin American summit, really kind of further putting to rest this bid to isolate Venezuela, which is definitely an embarrassment to a Canadian policy of overthrowing the Venezuelan government. I just got an email, I just looked at about an hour and a half ago, from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. I'm on their daily, get their daily emails. And the email says, we're working on a special community safety survey, which you'll see this month, to assess the situation across the country in regard to incidents of hate targeted at our community and supporters of Ukraine. So the UCC has been pushing this idea, mostly on campuses, of there's like all this hate against Ukrainian Canadians, and therefore universities should be like shutting down the hate events. And the hate events are talks that challenge Canada's role in the NATO Proxy War, essentially. Anyway, so the fact that they seem to be moving forward. They've been lobbying on this front with the Marco Mendicino, the immigration minister, arguing for the government to intervene. I'm not exactly sure what they want the government to do in terms of intervening, but we know they are trying to shut down all public events that challenge Canada's role in Ukraine, that challenge Canada's role in targeting Russia. And on Sunday, there was a talk in Toronto, one of the public libraries in Toronto, and there was a hard campaign for 3 or 4 days to try to shut the event down. It was a talk about peace. I forget the exact title of the talk. It was put on by the group that runs the World Socialist website, and there was a real hard campaign. There was a letter sent from the UCC, from Ukrainian Canadian Congress, to explicitly called repeatedly to shut down the event. There was people like Marcus Kolga, the disinformation guy. There was a whole bunch of people on Twitter threatening to disrupt the event. There seemed to have been some type of disruption that happened. So there was really quite an aggressive campaign. Fortunately, it went forward, so that's good. That's a victory, I think. There was a pushback. People like actually even Roger Waters, which I'll get to further in a second, tweeted about it, pushing back against this attack. And the issue here with them trying to shut these events down is, what's the acceptable discourse, right? What's the acceptable discourse? And you know what? Quite frankly, a lot of what very senior people in Washington, Ukrainian government have said is viewed as unacceptable discourse by a lot of the UCC types. So, for instance, at the CanSec protest or CanSec arms fair, and I should mention there were protests against it in Ottawa on Wednesday. And I know a number of people who are on the session participated in some of those protests. At the CanSec, the defense minister via Skype or Zoom or whatever, the Ukrainian defense minister said, quote, "Ukraine is now performing the mission that NATO was created for. Ukraine is Europe's shield in the east from the Russian threat. We are destroying the military power that was targeting European values and freedoms." So that's the head of the Ukrainian defense minister, making it pretty clear this is a NATO proxy war, right? There's a whole lot of people will freak out, including on the left, if you say this is a NATO proxy war, right? But this is coming from the defense minister. And so the UCC, in a different context, would try to shut down what the Ukrainian defense minister is saying. Obviously, the Canadian government continues with its path of escalation, prolonging the fighting. It looks like there's a whole bunch more fighting today, last couple of days, a bunch of attacks into Russia, and then looks like there's some major battles, maybe part of this offensive from the Ukraine beginning. It's not exactly clear, but today there's some reports of major battles. The Parliamentary Center, the Canadian Parliamentary Center, as part of this whole escalation stuff, they organized a talk a couple days ago titled "Toward Ukraine's Membership in NATO, Strengthening Euro-Atlantic Security." So they are, continuing this promotion of Ukraine joining NATO, which we know is an important factor in stoking the tension that led to the horrors that we're seeing. Yet there's no real pullback from Canadian government circles. It's more of the same. And now there's an interesting post I saw based upon an Economist article talking about Russia, what Russia's spending on this war in kind of historical terms. And the basic point is that Russia's spending very little, that it's only about its war budget is only about 3% of its GDP, in contrast to during World War II, when the Soviet Union was spending 61% of its GDP on war efforts. So this is obviously very, very small compared to a full kind of mobilization, which is, I think, part of what the Economist was getting at. And it obviously means that Russia has the capacity to devote a lot more of its national resources to war. So it has the capacity to keep escalating. And that's, of course, should be viewed as very, very troubling. I think it speaks to the fact that it's very unlikely, it's not impossible, but very unlikely that Ukraine's going to, quote unquote, win all its territory back. And there's no scenario where Ukraine can win no matter what now, of course. Even if they didn't get all their territory back, that wouldn't be a win. It's such a disaster. But there's very little chance that they're going to get their territory back. And in today's Foreign Affairs, that the article of the Council on Foreign Relations, the sort of preeminent body of the U.S. empire, there's an article, a big long article titled "The Unwinnable War: Washington Needs an Endgame in Ukraine" by somebody named Samuel Cherap, who's a total establishment ran corporation guy. And he goes through why this is essentially unwinnable for Ukraine, goes through, contrasting some of the battle issues and the capacities of Russia versus Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing that he points out in this long article, calling for the U.S. to start talking about negotiations, he points out, which is totally clear, you can keep sending weapons, keep fighting a war, and start pursuing negotiations. They aren't mutually exclusive. They tend to run in different directions, but they're not mutually exclusive. And so, but he points out in this article that the Security Assistance Group, Ukraine, has been devoted to the aid and training mission, which is led by a 3-star general with a staff of 300. Yet there is not a single official in the US government whose full-time job is conflict diplomacy. So they have this big team under a 3-star general coordinating US weapons deliveries and stuff like that. Yet not a single person who's just focused on diplomacy. And the Canadian government is more or less the same. I don't know the numbers of the Canadian government, but we know they don't care about diplomacy, and the whole logistical operations, ferrying and weapons. It's been a big thing Canada's been doing, is helping, I think, sending in US weapons as well, through different points in Europe to Poland from Scotland and elsewhere. So that's, I think, some of the context. Now, shifting gears, the far right Israeli so-called Diaspora Minister was in Ottawa and Toronto this week. Amichai Chikli, he's a homophobic guy, obviously, like, all of them openly racist in this government, far right government, openly Jewish supremacist, etc., anti-Palestinian. Weirdly, I don't get this one. Elizabeth May met with him. I honestly, the day or two before, Elizabeth May was part of this conference about international law and the Palestinian question that the Israel lobby came down at hard. And then I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know if she would meet with any minister who was that like openly homophobic, except I guess if it's an Israeli minister who's also openly racist, Jewish supremacist, colonialist, whatever. Anyways, Elizabeth May met with them, Erwin Kotler, a whole bunch of Liberal MPs, other MPs, even though there's been a call from the NDP to not meet with any of these ministers from the far right Israeli government. There was a tweet from the Israeli consulate or Israeli embassy that says that, quote, the purpose of Minister Chikli's visit is to study unique examples of Jewish education in Canada and how this can be replicated across North America. Investment in Jewish education is an investment in the future of Israel and the Jewish people. So here you have the Israeli government very explicitly connecting private Jewish schools with Israel promotion. That's something that we know. Almost no one talks about it. And obviously there was the big kerfuffle when 16-year-old teenager of Lebanese descent here in Montreal burned those flags at one of the Israeli flags taken from one of the Jewish schools' fence a few weeks back. That was apparently a big example of anti-Semitism, though it was the Israeli flag. And so we know that happens. The minister went to Tannenbaum Chat, which is the biggest private school in Canada, in Toronto, high school, that hosts IDF days, often brings in Israeli officials. It's a registered charity. It's a total scandal that basically no pro-Palestinian people, no independent Jewish voices, no left-wing group in this country really ever challenges this school. I've written about it a few times, but it's clearly the Israeli diaspora minister sees this as a part of the whole Israel lobby, indirect at least lobby apparatus, as a feeder system to people who go to Israel, who lobby for Israel within Canada. There's a new film. I didn't get the name of it. It's circulating around on Twitter, mostly focused on, and I guess I don't know entirely or mostly. I just saw some clips of in the U.S. and how the big swath of the Jewish community in the U.S. has basically come to believe or learn or taught that Palestinians are a threat to them. And in this clip of the film that is circulating on Twitter, that a bunch of sort of pro-Palestinian people are promoting, and there's now a huge backlash from the apartheid lobby on Twitter, at least. They have some statistic where some student says 10% of my friends, 10% of the people in my class at this whatever Jewish school in the US, they joined the IDF, right? 10%, which is completely bananas, joining another country's military. But that we know that's happening in Canada too, at a number of these schools. And that's what the Israeli quote unquote diaspora minister was clearly, part of trying to maintain and continue. So it is an issue that we need to grapple with. I know it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but it does need to be dealt with. Just imagine during the time of apartheid South Africa, there was a school hosting South Africa Defense Forces Days in Toronto, right? And there was nobody picketing that school. I mean, if you're going to host IDF days, you should be picketed. Let's sorry. I know the howls and the screaming and the anti-Semitism, whatever, but that's just the reality. If you're hosting IDF days, disrupt, and certainly disrupt their charitable status. Make students who are maybe on the fence uncomfortable. Make some of the teachers who are maybe on the fence uncomfortable. There has to be a pushback to that kind of thing. There's been a couple of successes or sort of successes on the Palestine front. The Quebec Pension Fund pressured it had his major stock or investment in G4S, a big private security company, and they seem to have convinced G4S to divest from some of its operations in Israel. And the Quebec Pension Fund people and sort of publicly said that they were uncomfortable by the moral questions of these investments. So that seems to be it's obviously a good development. There's a campaign that was launched with a legal brief this week around the upcoming visit of Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister. He's supposed to be speaking on June 14th in Toronto with Heather Reisman, the Chapters Indigo CEO, a really staunch anti-Palestinian, who has that Hesek Foundation that funds non-Israelis joining the Israeli military and provides all kinds of support for them. It's a registered charity in this country, probably in contravention of CRA rules. So Naftali Bennett is supposed to be speaking on June 4th or June 14th, and a legal brief was presented to the CBSA, Canadian Border Services Agreement, agency, saying that they should, and the minister Mendicino, that they should uphold their duties under Canadian and international law and bar him from entering Canada. It would take I think it would be a pretty big, it would kind of be a bit of a miracle for that to actually happen, because that would create a huge political media storm. But there is a legal case for it. And the issue was picked up. The Israeli media picked up. CBC did a story, Jordanian media, Jurist publication, and there's some more developments coming on the front. The main focus of the complaint is the illegal settlements, which are war crimes according to Canadian policy and the UN policy that Bennett's part of, not just as a prime minister, but also he headed up the Yeshiva Council. That's basically just a settlement promotion body back prior to becoming prime minister, and then a whole bunch of other things that he's part of. And he's also on record boasting about how he's killed Arabs, and there's nothing wrong with killing Arabs. There was also, as part of this, there's an individual who's actually taken this to the International Criminal Court and filed and saying the ICC should intervene to arrest him, Bennett, when he comes to Canada. And we'll see if that gets, and that was just, I just learned about that yesterday, and we'll see if that gets that potentially might get some traction, at least from a media standpoint. Again, it would be very unlikely the Canadian government would do that, But already there's been, I think, a successful kind of pushback. About 1,000 people have emailed the minister. It's gotten some, action on Twitter, obviously some corporate media. So already it's been a success. And I know there's plans for protests when he is if he gets in the country, when he's in Toronto. So on a couple of days ago, I was able to catch up with Mark Miller, who's Canada's Indigenous Affairs Crown Relations Minister, to ask him a question. And I tried to. I almost got into a good situation to do it, but I got a little bit disrupted by his people. I'll let you listen to this.
Mr. Miller, I want to ask you a question. You've spoken eloquently about how Europeans stole these lands from Indigenous people. You've spoken it. How about Mr. Miller? Stop touching me. Stop touching me. How about Europeans? Did Europeans steal lands from Palestinians? You think Europeans stole the lands from Palestinians? Did Europeans steal the land from Palestinians? Mr. Miller, why have you said that you're a great friend of Israel and your government has supported Israeli crimes against Palestinians and the colonization of Palestinians?
I love Israel, my Israeli brothers and sisters. Why wouldn't I?
Because Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch call it an apartheid state, committing the crime of apartheid.
It doesn't.
Do you agree with that?
It doesn't mean that you don't hold your brother to account. But
do you agree with Amnesty?
My Israeli brothers.
Amnesty and Human Rights Watch. Is Israel committing the crime of apartheid? Why can't you answer that? Is it committing the crime of apartheid? Is it committing the crime of apartheid, Mr. Miller?
So that was the question that I was trying to get at was the fact that, at least rhetorically, and it is mostly rhetorically, let's be very clear about that there is the land back is not really on the agenda, but rhetorically, the Canadian government can make these declarations about dispossession of Indigenous people, colonization. Now, I've seen people point out that like land acknowledgements, which have become, like the Vancouver Canucks now have land acknowledgements. And they were saying that like in Israel, that's just completely outside of bounds. The idea of having land acknowledgement, maybe there's like some like fringe, like lefty group that has some land acknowledgements in Israel. Now, of course, it's a lot easier to have a land acknowledgement when you've sort of basically wiped all the Indigenous people out, and you've stolen basically all the land, and it's your chance of that being reversed is, in a macro way, is pretty slim. It's obviously, so you could argue that's a little bit cheap, and I think that it is in the Canadian and certainly the Trudeau government. Their rhetorical gestures are quite cheap. Nonetheless, I think it's an interesting one to see how Canadian official who can say that about Canada can absolutely not say that about Israel. And I tried to ask that question. I was, fortunately for me, the event was like, it was dark. It wasn't well lit. So when I got in there, I got right next to him, and I was standing there. I was maybe actually too polite. I just stood next to him while a couple of people finished their thing. Finally, a flack of his, I guess, recognized me, came over, and then anyway, so she sort of disrupted my ability to ask the question, I think clearly. So I would have liked to have gotten him really clearly on that. I think there's a small chance he may have actually tried to answer if I would have got a better situation asking it. Anyways, so in different news, there's a total attack against Roger Waters. I think I mentioned maybe last week, but it's just continued, and it's gotten completely crazy in the Toronto Star. Specifically, there's also a column in the National Post, but in the Toronto Star, they published two different columns that are just over the top. Like one of them is something starts with like, finally, Roger Waters met a Jew he likes. And then that's supposed to be Anne Frank. So because he mentioned Anne Frank's name. I mean, it's just like, just silliness, like just total mockery of claims of anti-Semitism. The one article is titled, "Shame on Those Who Treat Anti-Semite Roger Waters as Rock Royalty." And the other one is titled, "Pink Floyd's Roger Waters Needs Some Education." Both of them are just completely over the top in their attack. And I wrote a response. I wrote one that's just sort of focusing on actual allegations a few days ago, a week ago. But I wrote one that kind of like contrasts like what Roger Waters is all about. And you know what? Like what Roger Waters has done on challenging Canadian foreign policy is actually quite significant. I mean, he signed the No UNSC statement back 3 years ago that helped defeat Canada's bid for NATO Security Council. He did a video at the time. He did a specific video all about opposing the UNSC and why he opposed it, which got wide traction on Twitter and Facebook and online. Got picked up by some media. Recently, he did a talk when the McGill students last summer, when he was playing in Montreal, the Bell Center in Montreal. The day before, he did a talk in solidarity with the McGill students who've been attacked for passing the Palestine Solidarity Resolution. 71% of student undergrads that voted supported this, and then a huge onslaught from the Israel lobby and the administration pressured the student union, and they just revoked after students had voted overwhelmingly for it. They just simply revoked the resolution. No, it's not legitimate. Just threw it out. Under tons of pressure, obviously divided internally, but under tons of outside pressure, they did that. And Roger Waters did an event. He signed a couple letters on criticizing Canada's role in Haiti. He did a webinar with the Venezuelan foreign minister opposing Canada's intervention in Venezuela. He's done a whole host of things, unlike, quite frankly, a whole bunch of lefty Canadians. I'm not going to name names, but prominent lefty Canadians who won't sign these public letters. But Waters has been willing to do that, and this is. I mean, he's being attacked principally because he's a principled opponent of Israeli apartheid, but also because he challenges this unjust global order, and which Canada's pro-empire, pro-corporate foreign policy is a big part of. So it's just intense to see just how bad the media is. The Toronto Star published that. The National Post publishes a column by Avi Ben-Lolo, which is based upon just a complete and utter lie. It's just didn't happen. He claims the Star of David was on the pig that Waters had in the audience at this recent shows in Germany. It's just not true. It's just a complete fabrication. You can find the pig. This version of this pig's been at his concerts for 50 years, going back to their album of 1977. The pig that he's referring to happened in 2013. That pig also had the crucifix. It also had symbol of Islam, also had a whole bunch of other symbols. Well, after Roger Waters came out in favor of BDS, the Israel lobby made a huge kerfuffle about the pig that had a Star of David, alongside a whole bunch of other symbols. And now they're recycling that 10 years later. Avi Ben-Lolo is just embarrassing himself in the National Post, recycling that. I wrote a letter in response. They're almost for sure not going to publish it. You can just lie in service of power with almost no right to respond. Another kind of somewhat similar incident of what I would call use of anti-Semitism at the service of the right and empire took place in a parliamentary committee meeting on Chinese interference. So Andrew Mitrovica, who is an author of a book on CSIS back in 2003, he is written a bunch of recent pieces, very good pieces, pushing back against the China interference about CSIS, and he's just one that a couple of days ago published. about how these like RCMP officers, these like, you know, total, you know, establishment kind of security world people are basically being accused of getting total runaround, excluded from their jobs because of this like CSIS innuendo. It's all like a bit unclear, and that they're somehow tied to China, or somehow they're not you know, loyal, if you want. And it was a very good piece that he just wrote. Now, he was invited by the Liberals to speak at this parliamentary committee meeting. And so at the parliamentary committee meeting, the Conservative MP, of course, the Conservatives are trying to, you know, the Liberals, Trudeau is just in the pocket of the Chinese, whatever. And so Mitrovica, who's very knowledgeable in this domain, is obviously an embarrassment for them. Him pushing back on this. So he was just straight up accused. The Conservative MP just said, "You're an anti-Semite." Okay, at this parliamentary committee meeting, I think on Thursday or Friday. Mike Barrett's the Conservative MP. Now, the basis of this is what? We don't like, well, we know what it is actually a basis, but like what, right? And so it makes this allegation, and they're basically saying that, you know, this guy never should have been allowed to talk about Chinese interference. And then what happens? CIJA, B'nai B'rith, Honest Reporting Canada, they all come out on Twitter immediately, saying Mitrovica is, you know, what happened is he's written things critical of Israel. He writes for Al Jazeera. He's a column in Al Jazeera, and I think it's a monthly column, and he's a prof at Sheridan College. He's a journalism prof. He's got like a long history, whatever. And he's written stuff that support Palestinian rights. And so now this allegation, the Conservatives use it to go after the Liberals, to marginalize this viewpoint. Then the apartheid lobby groups back the Liberals, the Conservatives up in this as part of this smear to just isolate. Nothing that his presentation, nothing to do with Palestine, Israel, whatever, but it's a way to marginalize voices that are dissenting against the China craziness. And so B'nai B'rith tweeted out, Andrew Mitrovica, the day of, right away, very soon after. Andrew Mitrovica has a history of writing columns that falsely accuse Israel of deliberately killing Palestinian children and other anti-Israel tropes. B'nai B'rith Canada questions why the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics chose to invite an investigative reporter who writes for Al Jazeera as a witness for its study on foreign interference. How dare they have an Al Jazeera reporter present on this matter? So that's a dynamic at play. Now, today, Political reported, to deal with our final subject before we get some to comments and questions and whatnot. Political reported in their daily send out the main event, with foreign interference dominating the political arena and a Chinese warship buzzing a US destroyer. We're in for another week where China is the key word on everyone's lips, even if they don't say it out loud. Well, on Friday's National Post, they said it out loud. The front page, the whole National Post was devoted to Chinese interference and related stuff. On Friday in the Financial Times, the British Financial Times, probably the best paper in the world, they said, quote, they had a big full-page article titled "The U.S. Buildup in China's Backyard." So the National Post, I thought it was a very good contrast. National Post, foreign interference in Canada, freak out. The Financial Times, big long explanation of this U.S. military buildup in China's backyard. And that's what this foreign interference is really all about, right? It's about legitimating Canada's participation rather than we are trying to contain China's rightful rise as the most populous nation in the world. They should be the most powerful nation. If you believe in equality, China and India should be the two most powerful nations. That the China interference is all about framing us as the victim while we're in fact supporting this odious US-led campaign. Now, part of that, we have HMCS Montreal through the Taiwan Strait with a US naval vessel. And there's a bunch of stories, a bunch of media about how, I guess yesterday, I don't know if it happened on Saturday or Sunday, The Chinese sent a vessel close to it, kind of a little bit of a dangerous move. But the Chinese said, of course, that what the Canada and U.S. are doing was, quote, deliberately provoking risk. And of course, Canada and the U.S. Had a big freak out. The Globe and Mail article, I thought I forgot to bring it in here, but the Globe and Mail article today is all frames as, China defending itself for having done this aggressive move. When in fact, if you look at a map, it's not very close to Canada's territorial waters. As Caitlin Johnson put it on Twitter, quote, U.S. accuses Chinese warship of unsafe maneuver in the Taiwan Strait. China accuses U.S. warships of being on the wrong side of the fucking planet. I think that kind of encapsulates the issue. And there was also another event, American spy plane a couple of days earlier that the Chinese intercepted, and then there was media about that. We have to be clear about this. This is an accident. I don't think either side necessarily wants to for the ships to hit each other or whatever. But it's an accident in a way, right? There can be a mistake, and that can lead to a war. Let's be really clear. And we're going right to that edge, right? And there is not a single MP in the House of Commons in Canada that will say anything critical of Canada sending a naval vessel. I'm not sure, maybe I missed it, but I don't know of a single MP saying, why is Canada sending naval vessels 10,000 kilometers away with the US Navy to run these provocative maneuvers? So Jenny Kwan, the NDP MP in the Vancouver East, where I grew up, it's been an NDP riding forever. She's out there framing, she's going to keep fighting the big bad China. She got her CSIS briefing about how apparently China was targeting her, etc. A couple of days ago, I think on Friday, she joined the launch of a Hong Kong Watch Canada alongside Melissa Lantsman, Irwin Cotler, a number of other liberal conservative MPs. This is a group that was set up 5-6 years ago by this conservative MP in Britain, funded by American government and whatnot. And it's all about sort of pressuring China, hyping the Hong Kong question. And obviously, Heather McPherson is on this other interparliamentary group. NDP Foreign Critics on this anti-China interparliamentary group that's funded by the US, Taiwan. Now, the NDP has come out and said they put that resolution calling for the foreign interference for the special rapporteur, David Johnson, to be ousted from his position. And then when it passed, and then he said, no, I'm not doing that, they criticized him. So they're supporting this totally childish Pierre Poilievre a campaign against Johnson. There's a clip circulating on Twitter of Poilievre like 10 or 15 years ago when Harper appointed Johnson for this inquiry, and Poilievre is just like, Johnson is upstanding credentials. He's how dare anyone possibly say that he's not totally independent, whatever. It just makes what he's been saying recently just a complete farce. And Jagmeet Singh is amplifying it. He's going along with this. He's echoing this. Now, there was a poll that was published. I first saw it in Le Devoir, and then I went and found the poll. It says that NDP voters are not on board with the whole public inquiry. The NDP's been pushing for this public inquiry on Chinese interference for a couple of months now. According to this poll, 39% of NDP members said that public inquiry is not needed and it won't tell us anything more. 37% said a public inquiry is needed. There's more to learn. So despite the party pushing it for multiple months, most members are not on board for this. Conservatives, it's like 10-1. that want it, and the Liberals is 2-1 that don't want it, the public inquiry. So they're even going against the opinion of the party itself in pushing this stuff, it seems. And what, what's the electoral strategy here? Right? What's the electoral strategy? You're going to peel off conservative voters on this stuff? All of this is a disaster from the progressive perspective. It's a disaster. There's no upside. Just in terms of electoral issues, the first past the post is a way bigger obstacle to Canadian democracy, undermining voter turnout, etc. Corporate domination of the media, capitalist domination of the economy. If you talk about foreign interference, U.S. interference is much greater. So all of this discussion is bad. It turns people off of partisan politics. It's just the worst. It induces the worst type of cynicism. And yet they're pushing it with, I'm not seeing the electoral gain. So if there's a huge NDP electoral gain, okay, you can kind of understand it, but it doesn't seem like that even exists. So why are they doing this? But they're doing it. And I think the reason they're doing it is because this is where the empire is going, right? To get a sense of that, why the US is so panicked about China, this statistic is just stunning. Financial Times reported, Chinese trade with Latin America has exploded this century from $12 billion in 2000 to $495 billion in 2022, making China South Africa's biggest trading partner, South America's biggest trading partner, right? 12 billion to 495 billion in 22 years. Unbelievable growth of economic influence in South America. And that's what's going on here, right? That's what the Americans are concerned about. And this foreign interference business is all about that. I should also note that Anita Anand she's at the Sring Lang, I don't know how you pronounce it, summit there in, I think, is it in Singapore? But it's an Asia-focused summit. And so she's made a whole bunch of announcements. One of them is that a Canadian will become the deputy commander of the UN command in South Korea, which it comes out of the Korean War. A couple posts about Korean War and that. Now, of course, Korean War is total devastation. This is all a bunch of. It's basically the UN command is just American. The Americans had all the power at the UN when it was created back in the early 50s. And it's under it's U.S. general that oversees the whole thing. And now Canadian will become the deputy commander for the second time. 4 or 5 years ago, there was a Canadian deputy commander. And she's boasting about that. One final thing I'll just say on the China question before opening up to comments, questions, and criticisms is someone on Twitter pointed out there's this column in the business section of the Globe Mail Report on Business by Tony Keller. And it's titled, "How Big Are Canada's Carbon Emissions? Compared to China, we're a rounding error." That was the title. And this person on Twitter points out, I think correctly, this isn't factually based. Saying on a per capita basis, of course, it's totally false. Canada's per capita base is far higher than China's still today. If you take a historic analysis, it's even that much more. China's emissions have risen drastically, but it's actually quite recently. And also, further part of it is a big part of China's emissions are in fact the manufacturing being moved to China by North American companies, and then the products being sent back into Canada. So even some of China's emissions. This is in no way to justify, the fact that China still builds coal plants is totally outrageous, that we absolutely can't be doing that. But this business of a Globe and Mail Report on Business columnist basically using that to justify massive continued expansion of the tar sands and Canada to continue, it's some of its highest per capita emissions in the world. That's what, of course, the article is about, and it also just fits into the general kind of anti-China kind of climate. I'll leave it at that, and if people have comments and questions, go ahead. I'll let Laura go first, and then also I'll make you a co-host, Laura, to moderate things.
So my question is not specifically a Canada question, so I hope you don't mind, but I'm just wondering, because I know you do a lot of reading. Something I've been thinking about lately is we see all these countries that are sort of coming on the anti-China thing with the US, Philippines, 3 new bases. So many of the countries are coming on board, and they're the biggest trading partners of China. But what I haven't seen is anyone explaining how they think going after China is going to affect their economy, how they're going to continue to survive and flourish if they're committing to the US's battle against China. Like, how's that going to work? Have you seen anything that kind of explains people's thinking on how this can work out economically for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Philippines, there's some specific territorial disputes, right? I think the Americans have done a good job of using the fact that China has some real territorial disputes that I don't think that, I think there's some legitimate criticism of China, right, on some of these questions. It's a bit much to see, Canada's the Canadian naval vessel with American naval vessels talking about international law and the law of the seas, when in fact the U.S. hasn't signed United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, right? So U.S. is one of a very small number that hasn't signed. So the hypocrisy there is a bit much, but I think that there's some legitimate territorial disputes, and so the Philippines also has a long history of being American dominated, so that's explained some of that. Same thing with Japan, South Korea, and how they're ramping that up. I mean, Australia is huge trading partner with China and is sort of prioritized its military relations with the U.S. over some of its economic self-interest. And but yeah, I think that these countries they don't want war. I don't think they want war. And I've seen a lot of rhetoric from the Philippines, Marcos new officials, where they're saying the Americans can't use this to fight China. This is all sort of defensive and this and that. They try to, and the Chinese are basically saying, I don't forget the island, but it's pretty close to Filipino island where one of the American bases is going to be, or at least operating around from. It's pretty close to Taiwan, and the Chinese are kind of hyping up the fact that these people are going to be, you're going to get, if there's a war happens, you're going to get killed. You can't act like you're going to be not in the firing line if this happens. And obviously a way to have those people put pressure on their government to not join this give more American bases. But yeah, I think it's a real question. The Chinese economic power is just now totally overwhelming in the region, and so those relations are really important. But yeah, I don't have a full explanation of how those governments, how they think they're going to straddle all of this. One hand, deepen the military ties to the U.S., on the other hand, maintain their good economic relations. I know. Again, in the Philippines, I listened to some stuff and read some stuff about there was a real feeling that under Duterte, who was viewed as sort of like closer to, less subservient to Washington, which just on a parentheses, I think is in a large part why there was so much hype about him being this like really ruthless guy. If you notice now with Marcos, there's almost no sort of talk about how Marcos is ruthless, even though he's obviously from a very odious dynasty. And I think it's in large part because Marcos has really followed Washington. And but anyways, that during Duterte, there was a feeling that the Chinese didn't really come through economically as much as they maybe would have expected for how much Duterte was willing to be more conciliatory. I don't know if that's correct, but I know people making that claim. But yeah.
Okay, so John, you're next.
Thanks. I'm interested in your take, Eve, on the precious metals, the Ring of Fire, and at one level, the relationship with Canada and the Indigenous peoples is a foreign relations question that kind of falls in your area, and also the competition with China as a source of rare earth metals makes China a competitor to Canada in the international relations. And it all sort of comes together with this Stellantis and VW deal that are triggered by the response to the US IRA and a Canadian industrial policy that may or may not run afoul of China. So there's a real furball of intersecting interests there. And I'm just wondering how you would sort of, what's your take on the Ring of Fire treaties, China, and how that affects our foreign relations posture?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing I would say in all of that is I don't think that electric cars are a good thing. I think we should get, drastically diminish the private automobile, and I've written co-authored a book about that.
Just well, on that, just I take your point, but even if electric cars, then we're looking at mass transit that needs to be dependent on non-fossil fuel sources. So that takes the same question at a different level, but it's still the same question.
A much lesser scale, I think, would be the. But I get your point. But the buses and other forms of transport is so much more efficient that you can drastically reduce how many metals you need or how many rare earths you need, or lithium. Or now, I can't say that in terms of the Ring of Fire and the politics of that, I haven't followed it close enough to I know there's big plans to extract huge amounts of different minerals, and there's complaints. You've seen that a lot in the business pages recent days, weeks, complaints that there's all this investment being put into the VW electric car plant there in St. Thomas, Ontario, one of the biggest corporate subsidies in Canadian history, 13 billion or whatever, and then the other plants there in Windsor, that electric battery plants, and that they're basically, the mining industry is saying, hey, you're giving all this money to these sort of foreign companies that are going to be producing these batteries, but why not the mineral extraction that is the basis of a lot of that? So that's being pushed by a segment of Canadian capital, the extractive element. There, the Americans clearly do support. The Americans are putting up money to, Pentagon is, offering money to Canadian mining companies to get some of these rare earths. I know they're actually not that rare, and the fact that the Chinese have such a dominant position is actually to do with sort of a bunch of different factors that could be overcome fairly quickly. So I don't know how much of a geopolitical importance this may have over the medium and long term. So and there is a battle. There's clearly I wrote about this in the piece I just did on the capitalists. The fact that I align with these horrible capitalists like the head of Barrick Gold and Robert Friedland and Terence Corcoran and stuff like that on them pushing back on China. And the mining, one of the worst forces on Canadian foreign policy, the mining sector is one of the forces pushing back on the ramp up tensions with China. And so they clearly they're not happy with cutting out investment from Chinese companies, some state-owned Chinese companies. But yeah, I don't know exactly where that's going with the Ring of Fire and how much how important that is to rare earths. I don't even know the specific. Maybe you might know more about that in terms of what there actually is in terms of minerals. I know there's a lot of minerals to be potentially extracted, and I know there's a lot of resistance from First Nations, but I don't know the more kind of detailed element than that.
Well, parenthetically and possibly relevant to this is the recent, in the last year or two, the Vancouver mining company that was sued in Canadian court for the use of slave labor in Eritrea, Nesken. They settled out of court finally rather than go to court. And then shortly after sold themselves to a Chinese mining company. So put that in whatever context seems best for this. Thanks, Eve.
Yeah, no, and that's, I mean, really, let's be really clear, right? The head of Barrick Gold, they have a big, I think in Pakistan, they have a big operation with the Chinese company.
Yeah.
They're not pushing back on some like moral ground. They're pushing back for strictly more profits. We see this as the profitable relationship. You know, we want when, you know, there was a whole big brouhaha about the Argentinian, the Canadian company had assets in Argentina. And I think the Liberals okayed the being sold to a Chinese company. This is about a year and a half ago. A huge, you know, freak out. And, you know, this company, the only thing it had was assets in Argentina. Like, how in the world should like the Canadian government get to determine who can own those assets in Argentina? But you know, the NDP and the Conservatives were adamant about this. And then in response, part of that pressure, they stopped some Chinese companies from purchasing a couple of different Canadian companies. Obviously, from a Canadian capitalist perspective, if there's some Chinese company that can give them like a premium on their shares, and that's the best deal that's out there, they don't care if it's a Chinese company, if it's an American company, what they just want, you know, more money. That's all very straightforward. But then there is also this geopolitical dimension where, you know, that those economic relations, you know, undermine some of the other bad forces of Canadian foreign policy, i.e. the US empire, the intelligence agencies, the military industrial complex. But yeah. So.
Okay, we have two questions. The first is by Niobe, sorry, and then Laurel. So go ahead, Niobe.
Thank you. I'm just pointing out to Eve a person that's been after our organization has also been after him, and I posted the person's name. This is on Twitter, and it's frustrating that, you know, people think that the left in Canada is Putin, rah, rah, rah. Anyway, I put in who this person is. I'm just, I'm angry, but I don't want to make it worse. I don't know if we should answer her or just let it go. But I mean, if she has 700 followers, I don't know. I'm looking for some direction here or some good thinking on this matter, because obviously she's not the only one who thinks that peace activists are, you know, being paid by, I mean, Russia is not even communist, but anyway, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm not seeing the detail. I'm just trying to write to the chat a little here to see some of this. But, you know, on the general level, I don't know how to, you know, I engage with some of it. I find that most of the, there's a big swath of, you know, I think there's people who are actually open for a discussion. And I was saying that there was the end of last episode, somebody asked a question and had some criticism. Unfortunately, there was a time issue. I'd like to have some debates on the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour. I'm a little unclear kind of how that would work out, how to, I don't know if it would be exactly correct for me to sort of moderate a debate. Anyway, I'd like to have some different sides. Obviously, you don't want the most you know, okay, you're just a Putinist, you know, that's not helping anyone to have that kind of debate, and I would mostly just ignore some of that stuff. This Christy McFadden, I think I have seen her on Twitter.
Just to let you know quickly, she says WSW, this is from a post that you did that she retweeted. WSW, and obviously Eve, is terrible, and it's not a peace rally. They're part of the fake peace pro-Putin network, heavily infesting our supposed left.
Yeah, there's a whole milieu. You know, I think there should be probably a whole actual episode on this, and you know, there's been some stunning David Rovick's did a piece on this, and I saw another one from a British person. Medea Benjamin, I mentioned this in one of my columns. Medea Benjamin, who has a book on Ukraine, came out maybe 4 or 5 months ago. There's these, they call themselves anti-fascist anarchists. I don't know what basically, there was some degree of, these details are a little unclear, but they basically assaulted people who went to go to her event in Minneapolis, and they didn't just do this, and they published this like 2,000 word report back. I'm embarrassed. I said this on Twitter. I'm embarrassed that I read the whole thing, let alone have organized this like counter demonstration and then wrote the 2,000 word report back. Like, this is, and I had it at the Anarchist Book Fair. I mean, after this event last week at Anarchist Book Fair, I go inside and this person calls me. I'm standing talking to this this person acquaintance I with a 3.5-year-old. I'm standing there for a minute or two, and somebody comes up to me. "You're not welcome. You're a tanky," and repeats it like with all this vehemence. "You're a tanky." Tanky is like, a Putinist, I support authoritarians, whatever. Basically, this is sort of this leftist attack against other leftists for supporting authoritarian. And then I go, and then once I didn't even really want to go inside. I was just going to go for the walkthrough, like what I didn't actually want to spend it, So, but then once they've told me I can't go, I obviously have to go. And then I go for the walkthrough, and I come back out, and the person's sort of standing on the side, and I go up to them, and I'm just like they're all. I assume this is an organizer of the book fair. I don't recognize the person. There's a second person who came. I do actually recognize. I've seen this person at things, but I didn't actually recognize this other person. And I go up to them and start discussing, and then so they now I'm an anti-Semite. Okay, so first I'm a tanky, then I'm an anti-Semite. They've now flipped to the thing, and I'm just like, okay, like what's going on here? Okay, what's going on here is these are people who are like, they self-identify as like really radical, if you want to call it like that, but they're basically just upholding the bounds of acceptable discussion, right? If you go beyond this right here on Palestine and some other issues, you're an anti-Semite. If you go beyond this line here on the NATO Proxy War, calling it that even, you're a tanky, right? If you say you don't support, pushing towards war with China, you're a tanky that supports President Xi, right? Like that, and so it's basically NATO, it's imperial NATO alignment from self-described leftists. And it's not a surprise if you look at the newspaper, right? If you go through different issues that on take the CBC, okay, go through major important political issues. The CBC is willing to have people that say we should defund the police. The CBC is willing to have people on that say Canada is based on dispossession of First Nations and there's an ongoing genocide. The CBC is willing to have people on that say, people have to disrupt the economy by going on strike for the greater good. They're willing to have people on there that say that. And they are not willing to have people on that say Canada helped provoke this war in Ukraine, right? They just aren't. When it comes to foreign relations, the narrowness of debate is so much starker. And so these leftists, like, you don't want to be marginalized. I get it. I understand why someone doesn't want to be marginalized. I totally get that. And so they become part of that like marginalizing process by not wanting to like take on these issues that inevitably lead to marginalization. So I think that's a really central part in this whole process, in that if the CBC is never willing to have someone that goes on that says, we're not saying what Putin is doing is good, right? What we're saying is that what Canada has done is not good or right. And so that to me is like the central factor in explaining a whole host of this sort of like self-described leftist attacks against Medea Benjamin, right? Like as if the big powerful Medea Benjamin is like 15 people that show up at this like small little left-wing space, and then they're going to have, 10 self-described Antifa that are going to go disrupt. I mean, it's comical, but it's real. It's a real force. I don't think in a big picture, I don't think it's that actually powerful or anything, but it's not exaggerated. But it is real of a subset of leftist thinking that doesn't want to be marginalized by taking on these foreign policy issues. They're all down with Black Lives Matters. But what about the fucking core group in Haiti? Right? Doesn't give it, like, never even mention that there's like the white ambassadors in Haiti that are telling the 12 million Black people what to do. I mean, you can't get more crass racism. It's just like sitting there on your face. But that's not, we don't want to touch that. That's outside of bounds. Anyways, go ahead.
So, Laurel, yeah.
I don't know if you want to take this on or not, Eve, but I think you're right that we are just an accident away from a war with China, and I don't think it was an accident that we got in the way of their ship. But what are we going to do? What could China does not want to have a war with us? It definitely doesn't want to do that. What could it do to avoid a war with us?
I think I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with it. It makes absolute, complete sense from a Chinese self-interested perspective to stick to the domain, dropping morality, but just stick to the domain where they are doing better, which is the economic sphere, right? Their trade relations are going up, and they are 4 times more people than the US. So if they get their politics and economic stuff in order, from a long term, they are just going to be the biggest economy. Maybe eventually India will surpass them, but they are going to be that. So China doesn't want war. Conflict is the domain in which the US is the dominant, NATO is the dominant, and NATO spends like 4 times more on military than both China and Russia combined spend, right? Now, China is increasing its military spending quite rapidly, though it's still at about the same GDP, 1.3% of Canada. So it's quite low compared to Russia, compared to the US on a per capita or on a GDP basis. Not a per capita, on a GDP basis. And on a per capita basis, even lower. Yeah, I mean, but what are they going to do? I think China has, unlike Russia, which I think is a much more militaristic society than China. China has really tried to avoid sort of military deployments internationally and getting entangled in that kind of stuff. I don't know how this is going to play out, but I do think that the Americans and Canadians are clearly, I mean, the point is to stoke these tensions. I don't know, only the people who are on board these vessels really know who did what in the actual moment of when the vessels and a couple of days previous, when the spy planes and the fighter jets got, right? I'm prepared to believe the American line that they were running provocative maneuvers close to Chinese territory, and then the Chinese vessel came in a way that to sort of say, hey, we're taking this seriously, stop this, we're gonna do things that are kind of dangerous, right? One of the things going on right now is the Chinese are refusing to take phone calls from the US defense secretary, right? The Chinese defense minister is not interacting with the American defense minister. And I think that the strategy there is that we want to convey that we're really not happy with the militarizing you're doing, but the flip side to that is there is a bit of a playing with fire, right? We're saying we also believe that you don't necessarily want to provoke a war right now over that specific thing. So by not communicating, you are increasing the odds of an accident happening. You are, right? I think that's part of the Chinese way. It's from their perspective would be a defensive way of trying to have the Americans pull back from sending more and more vessels, more and more fighter jets to right close by, pushing up on Taiwan, getting more bases in the Philippines, pushing Japan to increase military spending, having more American military presence in Japan, South Korea, etc. I think from a humane, like avoid war thing, all of this is just like, no, we don't want any of this. This is just not what we don't want these games to be played. This is terrible.
Yeah.
But it is what it is what it is. And I think we have to, try to do what we can to pull back on our side. But yeah, anyways.
Yeah, we have to get it. We have to get something going to the, I don't know who decided, but I doubt it was an end, but we have to get something going where we say, this is not where we want to go. We've got it. We stop this, stop doing this because it is ridiculous. It's too dangerous. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions, Eve.
Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Same place, same time next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.